From the headquarters of Telesur English in Quito, Ecuador, I am Estefanía Bravo, and this is From the South. Weather conditions are taking a toll on the health of Central American migrants traveling in caravans heading north towards the U.S. border.
Migrants have walked a great distance, but they still have a long way to go. In Querétaro, Mexico, they were hit hard by the cold weather. But for many determined to find a better life, nothing will get in their way.
I'm going to wait and see what the government has to say. If they help us, I'm going to ask for asylum because I can't return to my country.
Thanks to the goodwill and support from those among the group, persons who could not walk any further were able to continue their journey.
First I was using a walking stick, then crutches. But someone gave me this wheelchair. Thanks to the solidarity of the people, we are continuing this journey.
Some of the migrants had to stay back because of respiratory infections, but many like Wilfredo are still determined not to give up.
The maximum distance that I know I can walk is 15 to 20 kilometers. Otherwise, my health would be at risk.
Children are the most vulnerable to the ill effects of the cold weather, so their parents have to take special care of them.
It is important to keep them warm. That is why I carry 7 to 8 blankets.
At the end of the day, they arrive at the shelter in Irapuato, where they can rest their heads for a while. That is, until they resume the long journey ahead on foot.
Our correspondent Pablo Perez is on the outskirts of Mexico City with the second group of migrants and tells us more.
Well, right here we are at the Pozotlan. These are the skirts of Mexico City at the north, and this is about 25 kilometers from where the migrant caravan started their journey today. At the early morning, the over 3,800 people left the stadium, Jesus Molina Stadium at the south of Mexico City. And right now they are trying to get rides with freight drivers, bus drivers that are leaving Mexico City towards north. And their point of meeting is going to be Tepeji del Rio in Querétaro. That's where they have a place to rest. And they are a little behind from the first group that left yesterday. That is a smaller group, so they can move faster, and they are already in the Guanajuato state. But they have no plans of joining today, but both are going to follow the same route to the north, and we will keep on informing what happens during this second stage of the migrant caravan.
We thank Pablo Perez for that report. Meanwhile, in the United States, citizens and activists from El Paso, Texas have held a protest against the militarization of the Mexican border. The demonstrators condemned the show of force by the Army and immigration authorities to intimidate members of the migrant caravans. They also said they were demonstrating against the xenophobic policies of President Donald Trump, who treats migrants as invaders and criminals.
So we're gathering here today to actually protest the militarization of the border. That's one of the areas. The United States has deployed already more than 5,000 active soldiers at the border with the purpose of stopping immigrants, children, mothers and fathers. I mean, the so-called caravan. The president has been quite successful in painting immigrants as criminals as a part of his racist rhetoric. So I think it is worrisome, and that doesn't represent our American values. So today we're gathering, protesting against that militarization, but also in support of immigrants, in support of those families that are coming in the caravan. They need to know that there's people in the United States that actually are worried about them, that we're going to welcome them, because if they are fleeing violence and persecution, the United States is the place that actually they can go and get some
opportunities for political ploy, and consequently as a war zone. And unfortunately, our communities then become the collateral damage for these political games and political theater that President Trump has been trying to put forward in order to justify funding for a border wall.
At least 31 people have died in two big wildfires that have swept California since Thursday. More than 100 people are still being searched by authorities and emergency services in the affected areas in the north and south of the fire. The fire in the north is one of the deadliest and most destructive in California's history, consuming much of the mountain town of Paradise. With nearly 25% of the fire contained, the deadly North wildfire has swept away 45,000 hectares.
We don't know the cause of this fire, and the town of Paradise certainly had a lot of preparation, but we're dealing with existential conditions that once they take off, the certain amount of dryness in the vegetation, in the soil, in the air, then the winds get up 50, 60 miles an hour. This is what happens, and we have to keep understanding it better, but we're in a new abnormal, and things like this will be part of our future. And this won't be the beginning. It'll be things like this and worse.
Meanwhile, President Donald Trump has blamed forest management for the fires. Trump said on Twitter that he will cut off federal funding if the forest management does not find a remedy for the wildfires, as billions of dollars are going to them each year. He described the mismanagement of forests as gross. Landslides have killed at least 10 people in Rio de Janeiro. After days of heavy rains, a great stone fell from a hillside in Piratininga district, hitting a group of houses during the night. According to the local fire service, 4 people are still missing. 11 have been so far rescued with the help of sniffer dogs. Close to 200 emergency personnel are working in the area with the help of volunteers, creating a bucket change to remove mud and debris.
This is not a surprise tragedy because the civil defense goes up the hill and says that it is forbidden to live there, but they do not set up a house, do not create a project, nor give anyone a shelter somewhere else. Where will the poor live?
Cuban President Miguel Díaz-Canel has visited Laos on the last leg of his trip to Europe and Asia. Díaz-Canel met his counterpart Bunang Vorachit in the presidential palace and signed agreements on banking and sports. Our correspondent in Havana, Alien Fernandez, brings us more details of the end of the president's first international trip.
The president of Cuba, Miguel Díaz-Canel, has ended his first international tour of several countries in Europe and Asia. His final stop was the Republic of Laos. There he held several meetings with the top government officials, headed by the country's president and the president of the National Assembly. Both nations have praised the visit of Díaz-Canel as a way to strengthen trade, economic and political ties. They signed cooperation agreements in banking and sports. During the last couple of years, dozens of students from Laos have traveled to Cuba to study in areas such as medicine, at the Latin American University of Medicine, Engineering and Law. The two countries established diplomatic relations in 1974, with excellent strategic results in different political and economic aspects. Laos is the last country on his international itinerary, which started in France and then continued to Russia, China, and Vietnam.
We thank Alien Fernandez for that report. Cubans are debating about the new constitution a week before they vote the project in a referendum. The project could add 87 more articles to the current constitution, focused on private property, the structure of the state, and marriage equality. More than 110,000 meetings have been held in different neighborhoods since August to debate the project. More than 300,000 people have participated in the discussions that will be solved next Thursday. We'll be back very soon. Stay with us. Welcome back. 89 Venezuelans have been flown back home from Chile as part of their return to the homeland plan. The process was facilitated by the Venezuelan embassy in Chile. Many more Venezuelans are expected to take up the government's offer of repatriation. In light of this, additional flights will be sent to Chile. Our correspondent Paola Drachnik was with them at the airport in Santiago.
The last Venezuelan migrants are boarding this first plane to leave Chile as part of the return to the homeland plan. It's a special charter with Conviasa, carrying 89 Venezuelans who signed up for the program. It's been an emotional day. The flight is about to leave from the international airport here. We have been following them. Many of them came to Chile with the idea of starting a new life, but now they have decided to go home. They told us that although the situation is difficult in Venezuela, they want to go back to work and help their country overcome the economic siege imposed on it. So, these 89 Venezuelans are joining the more than 8,000 who have benefited so far from the program.
We thank Paola Drachnik for that report, and Venezuela has been holding a drill for December's local council elections. About 1,000 voting machines were set up across the country for voters to practice and test the electoral process. More than 20 million Venezuelans are eligible to vote in the municipal elections on December 9th. Nearly 2,000 national observers will accompany the democratic process.
We live in democracy. We are not in a dictatorship or anything like that. If this was a dictatorship, we will not have municipal elections. Everything is going well under our government.
We live in full democracy, more than every other place in the world. We have the fastest electoral process. For instance, the United States just had midterm elections, and it was very complicated for them. The results were not immediately announced. They were announced the following day, and there are still doubts about the process.
Our correspondent Luis Tavera has been at the election drill in Caracas and tells us more.
Here we are from the Andrés Bello Voting Center in downtown Caracas, where at least 13,000 people are registered to vote. In this capital city and all over the country, people have been out since 8 a.m. to take part in this voting drill for the municipal elections next December 9th. Authorities like the Vice President of the National Electoral Council, as well as members of social movements, have visited and toured the different voting centers, this one in particular. The CNE is supervising and guaranteeing the development of this drill. The objective is to familiarize Venezuelan citizens with the process so that voting can be fast and efficient, which is something people here have highlighted.
More than 60 social organizations in Venezuela got together to discuss the current challenges against international threats. This is a preparatory meeting that will give paths to others in 2019 to defend the causes of the Latin American peoples and the world.
An atmosphere of peace. This is how Venezuela looks. But the attacks do not stop. The idea is to keep the peace.
Venezuela is a territory of peace that is being attacked by foreign powers that want to obtain our resources. But we are not alone. We count on the peoples of the world who fight neoliberalism and capitalism, which keeps trying to steal people's resources.
To make their voices heard around the world, debates like this are taking place in Venezuela.
The different social movements in Venezuela have many ways of organizing, but it is hard because of the isolation imposed by the United States and the EU. Nonetheless, this has always been a combative people with great awareness.
Their main objective is to confront the attacks of the right. Venezuela has been a firm example for the rest of Latin America and the world.
We are a point of reference for the struggle, for sovereignty, for education. We are at the forefront of the defense of sovereignty in Latin America, in the Caribbean, and in other continents.
Their message is clear: to be a shield in the face of international threats.
We think this is a vital initiative for popular organizations, for the people who organize and resist the effects of the capitalist crisis, and the way it is used to impose barbarism on the peoples of the world.
The next step will be another national meeting ahead of the first International People's Assembly to be held in 2019. Venezuela will be the host country again. More than 1,000 delegates from other countries are expected.
Another community leader has been murdered in Colombia. Héctor Fabio Almario was a coca grower leader in the southeastern department of Meta. His organization says he was killed on Saturday along with 2 other people. Our correspondent Paula Fernandez has more from Bogotá.
There is no end to the murder of social leaders here in Colombia, something that deeply concerns social movements and human rights organizations. In the last few hours, COCAM, the coordinator of coca growers, denounced the killing of Héctor Fabio Armario, a regional leader in Macarena in the department of Meta. There are reports that 2 other bodies were found along with that of Armario, but those have not yet been identified. The organization is calling on President Iván Duque, who is just about to complete 100 days in office, because in the course of this year alone, 181 social leaders have been murdered. So they are calling on the president to implement peace accords and provide guarantees to leaders in their communities.
In Brazil, the news that Judge Sergio Moro will be the new justice minister brings doubts about the future of former President Luis Ignacio Lula da Silva. Our correspondent in Sao Paulo asked one of Lula's lawyers about this.
It is the confirmation of what we said to the UN in 2016. This trial was conducted by a judge for political motives. Now, with this flagrant politicization, a confession that the political individual has been heading the case, we hope that the Supreme Court throws it out and frees President Lula, not only in accordance with Brazilian law, but with international law as well.
A group of artists in Bolivia have immortalized indigenous leader Tupac Katari in giant stone statues in the town of Peñas. He was executed by Spanish troops while fighting for independence.
With each hit of the chisel, the stone slowly takes form under the artist's hands. Every sculptor creates their own version of the indigenous leader. Tupac Katari laid siege to the city of La Paz in 1781 with an indigenous army of 40,000. He held the city for months against Spanish colonial troops until his capture.
We begin with putting ourselves into his place. We become Tupac Katari. We believe in our philosophy and our spirituality. All this comes from our grandparents. And this is how our work starts to become genuine.
What happened here is just a moment in history, but we will leave a mark. Our work will last forever, even if we as humans are just passing through.
These 20 artists were invited by the decolonization vice minister to carve the indigenous leader into stone.
This is a sacred place. Here is where our ancestor Julián Tupac Katari died. We always visit this place.
Julián Tupac Katari, our condor, was dismembered in this town, Peñas. We have his ahayu, that same courage.
Julian Apaza took the name of Tupac Katari to honor previous rebel leaders Tupac Amaru and Thomas Katari, executed by the Spanish. With his large army of indigenous rebels, he laid siege of the city of La Paz for 3 months. But after being betrayed, he was imprisoned in November 1781 and tortured for 4 days.
If he would have asked for pardon from the Spanish rulers to forgive him for trying to recover his territory and the freedom of his people, if he would have begged for it on his knees, he wouldn't have been executed.
The remains of the rebel leader were scattered across the provinces of La Paz as a warning. Some months later, his wife, Bartolina Sisa, who overtook his place as a leader, suffered the same fate after also being betrayed.
This is a very powerful story, and that's why it is hidden from us. If our youngsters will know about our history, they will be proud of being indigenous, of being Aymara, of being Quechua. The fact that this is not taught is a problem we all feel in our blood.
The current government has been trying to recover history. Here, in Peñas, just 50 kilometers from La Paz, the house where Katari was imprisoned and tortured for 4 days has been renovated. This is also the place where he was tied to 4 horses and torn into pieces.
We'll be back very soon. Stay with us. Welcome back. Hundreds have gathered in Paris to protest against U.S. President Donald Trump when he attended the ceremonies marking the 100th anniversary of the end of World War I. Floating above the protesters' baby Trump, a 6-meter-high blimp depicting the U.S. president as an orange baby also made an appearance. Despite maximum security, a topless female protester managed to pass the barricade and come within meters of Trump's motorcade before she was stopped by French police. More than 70 world leaders have gathered in Paris to commemorate the anniversary of the end of World War I. The much-awaited meeting between Trump and Russian President Vladimir Putin was rather brief. They both attended a lunch meeting organized by French President Emmanuel Macron, alongside with other leaders, including Germany's Chancellor Angela Merkel. The U.S. and Russian presidents are expected to hold formal talks later this month at a G20 summit in Buenos Aires, Argentina. And during the event, the Russian president praised Macron for calling to create an European army, a suggestion President Trump labeled as very insulting.
In principle, Europe is a powerful economic entity, a powerful economic union, and it's quite natural that it wants to be independent, self-sufficient and sovereign in matters of defense and security. I think all in all, it's a positive process in terms of strengthening the polycentric world.
The two Koreas have started to destroy 20 guard posts along their heavily fortified border. This as part of a plan agreed in late October to reduce tensions on the limits of both countries. The military has begun to destroy guard posts in the demilitarized zone after withdrawing troops and equipment from the border. South Korea has around 60 such posts along the rest of the border, while the North has about 160. An appeal trial has opened for a French man in Sweden jailed for rape in a scandal that led to the postponement of this year's Nobel Literature Prize. 72-year-old Jean-Claude Arnault was sentenced to 2 years in prison in October, accused of raping a young woman in 2011. He once was an influential cultural figure close to the Swedish Academy that awards the Nobel Prize. The appeals trial is expected to be held behind closed doors. And now let's take a look at some other stories making headlines around the world.
Around 200,000 people have marched across Warsaw in a parade to celebrate the centenary of Poland's independence. The main march involved far-right groups and neo-fascist activists, even from England and Italy. Last year, the parade saw some participants holding racist and anti-immigrant banners, which evoked global outrage. To avoid a similar debacle, the right-wing government held a state military parade to coincide with the main march. Separatists in eastern Ukraine have held elections to choose new leaders after the assassination of separatist leader Alexander Sakarchenko in August. Voters were largely supporting candidates who promised closer ties with Russia. The Ukrainian president urged people not to vote and, along with Washington and Brussels, dismissed the election as illegal. In 2014, Russia retook control of Crimea from Ukraine. The following conflict in the region has killed more than 10,000 people so far.
Today, we have passed a major civic and political test. We have proved to the world that we not only know how to wage war and triumph on the battlefield, but also how to build a state on the basis of true democratic principles.
At least 7 Palestinians, including a Hamas commander, have been killed in Gaza after Israeli forces launched airstrikes and an undercover raid. Hamas said in a statement that assailants in a cart opened fire on a group of its men that they chased. Witnesses say Israeli aircraft fired more than 40 missiles in the area. Shortly after the violence erupted, sirens warning of rocket fire from the Gaza Strip sounded in southern Israel, though there were no immediate reports of any damage or injuries in the Israeli side of the border.
Dozens of cat mummies and a rare collection of scarab mummified beetles have been unearthed in 7 ancient Egyptian tombs just south of Cairo. A team of archaeologists made the find while excavating a 4,500-year-old tomb. Also in the tomb were 100 gilded wooden cat statues, as well as a bronze statue of Bastet, the goddess of cats. The tomb is thought to date back to the 5th dynasty of the Old Kingdom, not long after the Great Pyramid of Giza was built. 8 dozen endangered African penguins have a second chance at life, thanks to a group of dedicated conservationists in Cape Town, South Africa. The seabirds were recently released into the ocean. Many were in pretty bad shape when they first arrived at the NGO-run rehabilitation facility. Some were abandoned as chicks. African penguins have been sliding towards extinction since industrial fishing started around the Cape. Only 25,000 remain today, compared to over 1 million that dotted the coastline a century ago.
It's absolutely wonderful.
And with that story, we've come to the end of this news brief. These and other stories, as always, find them on our website at telesurenglish.net. And also join us on social media, on Facebook, on Twitter, and on Instagram. For Telesur English, I am Estefania Bravo. Thank you for watching.
Enjoy our programming from Monday to Friday, where you'll find the best information on culture, innovation, conservation, human well-being. Keep up to date on the latest innovations in science and technology with Atomun. The habits and knowledge you need to live a healthy lifestyle are on Guide Your Body. Environmental consciousness is required to preserve our Earth. Undergo your transformation on Green Zone. All about equity, diversity, and respect for identities on By Gender. Cultural manifestations, the art in all its forms and the stories of real lives. Every day we feature a wide variety of content. Only on Telesur, the news source from Latin America and the Caribbean. In a world infested by inequalities, abuse of power, and injustice, the American journalist Abby Martin covers the struggle for fundamental rights worldwide, deepening into the search of files which uncover the empire's strategies through our screen and web platform in English. The Empire Files with Abby Martin. Tuesday, only on Telesur.